Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I want you to picture something with me for a second. Imagine stepping into this incredible, timeless garden. It's dawn. You know, that really quiet, pregnant pause right between the death of the night and the birth of the day? And in this garden, three of the absolute most legendary minds in Persian history wake up on the dew-wet grass. Today, we're diving into a breathtaking narrative from our source text that asks a pretty huge question. What happens when three completely different people, separated by centuries, go looking for the exact same truth? We're going to explore how they all found transcendence through three very different forms of what they called intoxication. Listen to this amazing thought from Rumi. He says, "I have lived on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door, it opens. I've been knocking from the inside." I mean, wow, right? That perfectly hooks us into what we're talking about today. We're looking at three historical figures who completely shattered the rigid boundaries of their normal lives to find something extraordinary. They weren't knocking on some external door trying to find God or universal truth. They realized the barrier was actually their own ego. They found transcendence through their own unique forms of drunkenness. And spoiler alert, none of them were talking about a literal hangover. Now, just to put this into perspective and really grasp the magnitude of their connection, we have to look at the actual historical timeline here. We've got Omar Khayyam in Nishapur during the 1120s, then Rumi in Konya during the 1240s, and finally Hafiz in Shiraz in the 1360s. They lived centuries apart. They literally never met in the physical world. But as we unpack this source material, we're essentially going to throw out the rules of time. We're going to track their individual journeys and watch how their paths inevitably, beautifully converge into the exact same philosophical space. So let's see how this all builds. Starting with Path 1, Rumi, the ecstatic. Transport yourself back to 13th century Konya to meet a man named Jalal ad-Din Muhammad. At 37 years old, he is this highly respected, very serious, orthodox legal scholar. He wears his dignified learning like a heavy, protective cloak. But then, everything flips upside down. This wild, fiery dervish named Shams-e-Tabrizi rolls into town. Shams basically looks at Rumi and demands that he throw his prized, completely irreplaceable manuscripts into a fountain. And shockingly, Rumi actually does it. All that rigid knowledge just sinks into the water. And in that exact moment, his heart completely cracks open. He abandons his formal scholarship and just surrenders completely to the physical, dizzying motion of the spin. To really get what Rumi is all about, we have to understand his specific brand of intoxication. There's a concept for this known as sukar. And no, this isn't about literal wine. This intoxication is about ego death. By spinning, Rumi is actively dissolving the boundaries of his separate self. He turns into a conduit, like a bridge connecting the physical and spiritual realms. The sheer dizziness systematically destroys that small, careful academic identity he had spent his life building and replaces it with the overwhelming joy of experiencing the beloved. Rumi actually explained this perfectly to one of his disciples, Hussam. Hussam was a bit confused and asked if the wine Rumi constantly talked about was literal or metaphorical. Rumi's response? He said, "The metaphor is not a decoration on the truth. The metaphor is the truth wherein close human language can touch." I just love that. The wine he's talking about is actually a liquefaction. It's what happens when a broken heart cracks open, and everything that was solid and rigid inside you just melts away. It lets you stop being this isolated, separate self and finally merge with the rest of the universe. All right, jumping forward in time a bit to the 14th century, to the city of Shiraz, we meet our second figure, Path 2, Hafiz, the sacred paradox. Now, unlike Rumi, Hafiz definitely doesn't find his holiness in some beautiful sunlit courtyard. The contrast in his life is incredibly stark. On one side, you've got the mosque. This is represented by a very severe sheikh who actually fires Hafiz from his teaching job. It's a place of super rigid rules and this absolute terror of any kind of doubt. But on the other side, Hafiz retreats to Vartan's tavern. Down there, hanging out among the drunks and the outcasts, he finds this profound sense of freedom and shared humanity. As Hafiz puts it, the mosque is for people who need convincing, while the tavern, well, that's for the people who already know. So what is Hafiz's path? How is he getting drunk? For him, intoxication is about being utterly drunk on paradox. He uses irony, mischief, and just plain laughter as these sacred tools to systematically burn away all the neat little boxes we use to organize our reality. He constantly blends the sacred and the profane, even suggesting at one point that God and the devil might just be sharing a drink in the back of the tavern. He totally embraces the cosmic joke of existence. He genuinely prefers the messy honesty of doubt over the dangerous comfort of rigid certainty. Through what he calls his sacred stupidity and his laughter, Hafiz reaches this state of total unbelievable liberation. He has this realization where he says, I have learned so much from God that I can no longer call myself a Christian, a Hindu, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Jew. The truth has completely freed him from every concept, category, and image that limits how we understand the world. By flat out refusing to take the rules of theology seriously, he ironically achieves a much deeper connection with the divine than those strict scholars who fired him ever could. And that brings us to our final figure. We're going to jump all the way back to 12th century Nishapur to explore Path 3, Khayyam, Equations of Dust. Omar Khayyam is a fascinating guy. He's an astronomer and a mathematician, a man who actually reformed the calendar and spent his life measuring the stars. But his life is defined by a really painful contradiction. He uses this predictable mathematical precision to study the cosmos, only to realize that the universe is just this indifferent, infinite void. He figures out that human mortality is just a temporary state before we all return to dust, driven by relentless entropy. And honestly, he is crushed by it. He realizes that human consciousness is just a brief, accidental flash in a cold cosmos that fundamentally does not care about our longing. But, and this is the incredible turning point, Khayyam realizes that recognizing the universe's indifference doesn't have to be a ticket to depressing nihilism. His logic is amazing. If nothing matters eternally, then we might as well drink wine, write poetry, and love each other while we actually still have the chance. If the universe doesn't care, well, that gives us the total freedom to care. It's not despair. It's this invitation for radical, joyful defiance right here in the present moment. So the most crucial thing for Khayyam becomes radical presence. You've probably heard this famous line of his, the moving finger writes, and, having writ, moves on. Think about that. The past is mathematically sealed. You literally cannot change it. And the future? Totally unwritten. Therefore, the present moment is the absolute only thing that truly exists. Khayyam's version of intoxication is found in the stark, mathematical beauty of fully accepting temporary things. All right, let's tie all of these threads together. We are now entering the convergence, the conference of dust. Our source material does this beautiful thing where it essentially folds time over on itself, guiding us into this no-time garden where these three distinct intellects finally cross paths. You have Rumi getting there through ecstasy and the spin, you have Hafiz using irony and laughter, and then you have Khayyam relying on mathematical observation. They took three entirely different roads, but they all acted as doorways into the exact same room of awakening and transcendence. As they converse in this imaginary, timeless garden, they discover their shared truths. They all agree that the idea of a separate self, it's a total fiction. They realize that whether you're looking at it through chemistry or divinity, the universe is really just consciousness waking up and recognizing itself. They understand that rigid theology is honestly just poetry trying to explain the unexplainable. And most importantly, they all agree that the present moment is everything. Which brings us to our concluding thoughts. The garden holds all of them equally. The garden is always open. The tavern never closes. You see, their shared conclusion isn't about earning your way into some afterlife. It's about waking up right now and paying deep, intoxicating attention to existence. It's about breaking out of those comfortable little illusions we build for ourselves and really experiencing the raw, beautiful absurdity of being alive. So here is the final provocative question I want to leave you with today. What intoxication or deep attention are you using to wake up to your own consciousness? Whether you spin, whether you laugh, or whether you measure the stars, the source material challenges every single one of us to find our own method to crack open that shell of certainty and step into the garden. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.